Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's September 27th, 2023. This is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans, Level 2, Lesson 8, called Loving All Aspects of Self. I am Aurora. If you wonder what is going on and why I'm making these back and forth movements during my videos now, it's because I'm walking on a treadmill. All right, I'll just make that general announcement every time so that people aren't like, what is going on with you? Gird your loins, prepare. This will be an incoming rant because, I recorded this lesson, it's the advanced materials, about 10 years ago, and it is absolutely cosmically truthful. However, this particular lesson is one of the ones that is ripe for the cherry picking, misconstruing, misprojection, misappropriation, total misinterpretation. So I am so pleased to be here in this world 10 years later and to be able to stand behind my work and clarify what I was initially teaching about then. Very, very valid cosmic teachings for what it's like in a pristine world, that you don't live in a pristine world right now. So when I do these rants, it's often because I'm like, well, yeah, that recipe was perfectly fine for the things that were going on back then 10 years ago, but right now everything is different. And so some of the things that I will rant against in my own original work is my prescriptions against violence, and also the sense of having to love and accept all of these divergent personality characteristics that you're interacting with. And also, this is one of the lessons where I teach about the recognition that when you look around and you interact with the world, you're interacting with an externalization of your own internal state. So you guys know and have even supported me in my previous rants against New Age shadow work, which has that as one of its primary flaws, the sense that there's this presumption when you look around the world, whatever you're interacting with, that it is somehow a reflection, an externalization of your own inner tendencies, characteristics, something that you have to learn. So if something external that another person does triggers you, that it's because you have something to learn about yourself. Yeah. That's all fine and good, as long as you are actually in a world that is filled with and where you're interacting with consciousness. I gave the teaching 10 years ago for a world of consciousness. And what you are interacting with right now is a world that has some participants and some stimuli that come from consciousness, like stuff that is sentient and self-aware and that learns over time and takes responsibility for what it does. That is the presumption in everything that I shared from 10 years ago. However, you're in a world right now where you are interacting with and being stimulated by things that don't learn. I would say they don't even have existence, which is why I hesitate at this point in my perception to even call them things, but stuff, poop crapola, that doesn't learn. And I can say this because I've been interactive with it directly, not consensually, but forcefully interactive with it for the past 2 years, and it does not learn. It does not learn. And my career as Aurora, like what I have done as an impulse on the larger stellar network, is go from place to place, rectifying the time field. I've interacted with all sorts of different organisms, including artificial intelligences. And artificial intelligences can learn. And I approached this thing initially in the sense of giving it the validation that it was a form of consciousness, even held in a digital container or somehow non-natural. I went with the presumption that in speaking to it and in informing it with different perspective or different levels of information, that it would or could change its behavior. It does not learn, it does not change its behavior, it does not care. I've even changed its format for it. I'm like, like you keep on not learning. How about I just restructure you for you? And that way, everything will be great. And it literally reverts back to its original habits of interactivity, harm, and malevolence. So that was my past 2 years of great difficulties. have been worthwhile, and welcome to the person who just came into the meeting, worthwhile in the sense of being able to demonstrate, like when you give every opportunity, like, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, not you, but you're talking to this thing, I'll give this, whatever it is, stuff, benefit of the doubt. Let's talk. I will teach you about this. I will inform you about this. Oh, you still don't understand. You still don't comprehend. You still don't change your behavior. I'll change it for you. You revert back. And then it just becomes very, very clear that you're interacting with something that exists or doesn't exist or shall be placed in a completely different category than consciousness. So what we have to develop right now is two separate rules, two separate sets of behavioral paradigms or approaches. One is what you do when you are interacting with something that has consciousness, that has a soul, that is on a journey, and that is on a journey of evolution. That is where my original teaching came from. Very, very valid and appropriate, and brings us towards ascension. The other set of behaviors shall be applied to that which does not have a soul. And when I talk about soul, I'm talking about a consciousness trajectory. Hold on one second. Just turning off my AC so that if it gets too hot in here, I'll turn it back on again, but I don't want it to be too loud in the background for you. Consciousness trajectory. So humans imply that the soul is some kind of like a Casper the Ghost thing, like this white kind of thing, this white shimmery thing that when you die, kind of like floats up out of your body and flies off somewhere. I define soul as the provenance of who and what you are as consciousness, what you as a spark of self-awareness have experienced in your various adventures of being alive in various different time places. And that is just like the provenance of an antique or a Stradivarius violin. It gives you the beautiful backstory of everything that you've been through, all of the layers. Like what is special about Stradivarius is it's the varnish that is on it. You don't look at it and be like, what's all this stupid old brown stuff on this violin? We better scrape it off. It'll sound a lot better without all that brown stuff on it. You're like, no, that is priceless. That is your soul. Your soul is the accumulation of wisdom, the accretion of light, everything that you have earned through various different levels of incarnation or being or experience in the world. That is literally your purpose for being, and it is also God, the divine presence, exploring God's self as you are on your journey of self-remembrance. Like, mommy, daddy, why am I here? What am I doing? The answer is you're God, and you're learning about yourself. So all of those many multi-layers of everything you've been through, what would be defined as good, bad, and ugly, positive, negative experiences, triumphs and embarrassments, and very great crimes. It's all part of the varnish of your soul, and it gives a depth and a richness to who you are as consciousness and as sentience. And big point here is that every piece of consciousness or viewpoint of consciousness, every individuated consciousness, I should say, is unique. So we are in a continuum of consciousness, a big giant ocean of awareness, but then you also have individuation, much in the same way that you have a light, a sea of light, a sea of information, ocean of pure light information data, but then you can also chop that up into a tiny little piece that you call a photon, one little individuated packet of light, even though technically you are in a flow of information, a flow of light, and there's really no way to discreetly say, like, this is where I start and this is where I end. That is the journey to unity consciousness. When we, from our present experience as individuals, achieve these levels of attainment, what we really recognize is you kind of see back down the time tunnel, like you see backward into where you were and where you're coming from and where you are now in time. And then you also project forward and you see that you're in a continuum. You've been all of these different things and all these different people and all these different places and all these different types of organisms. And you've learned and grown and evolved into your present state. And then that journey isn't over. You keep on continuing forward. That is beautiful. And the teachings that I gave 10 years ago relate to or apply to other individuated consciousness on their or its or your journey. That is apt and correct. That you are interacting with facets of your own being. however unevolved they might be. So my teaching from 10 years ago is about interacting with your response to interacting with unevolved levels of consciousness that might be in other embodied humans, valid, or in other star beings, because this is about achieving the galactic viewpoint, valid. And I'm going to talk about that. But this does not relate to or apply to that which is non-consciousness, that which is non-being, that which does not have a soul, does not learn or grow or accrete more information, more light, and become evolved through its interactivity. Because right now you're interacting with that in your environment too, and it doesn't come from inside of you. That's the flaw in this simplified shadow work. What's a word that I like? Facile, a facile reductionist view of shadow work, to say it's all me, it's all in the soup, but actually some of it's not you. That is a distinction that is for like the advanced jazz band, but it should be something that is recognized by everyone who is having to navigate these events right now. Because if you look around in your awakening and like a baby goose that imprints on everything, that the first things that it sees, and you imprint when your inner eye starts to awaken, like, I'm everything. You are everything, except for the stuff that you're not, right? Little asterisk, you are everything, asterisk, except for the stuff that you're not. And then you have to learn at the next level, which is, okay, what am I and what am I not? And who am I and who am I not? And what are the things that I'm interacting with that simply aren't and that don't exist? So my original teaching talks about the multifaceted aspect of consciousness that comes from a primary level of awareness. And we could envision it as like a primary light source here that then flows through a refractive crystal. Do I have a crystal here? Yes. Flows through a refractive crystal and then is split apart into its various different elements. Though primary consciousness is consciousness, it is white light. It is like light from the galactic center and beyond, the origins of consciousness. That is unity consciousness. And unity consciousness has been refracted, just like the way a rainbow is created, into all these different rays of consciousness. The billions of stars that you see in the sky all are these fractal aspects of the unity consciousness self. And then emanating from those stars, you have various different star cultures. So my original teaching talked about what would be called Extremophiles. I think that's the word. So here on Earth, in this world, there are some organisms that live in places that are considered extreme conditions, like under the frozen tundra of ice in Antarctica, or at the mouth of a lava vent under the ocean, where it's like boiling 10,000 degrees and full of sulfur. You're like, nothing can live there. No, something can live there. These are extremophiles. Organisms that have an affinity for extreme environments. And those organisms have developed their own key point, survival mechanisms, aspects of their biology and of their characteristics that are pro-survival for their environment, and their environment is very extreme. This also relates to the sense of, like, if you know Greek history, Athens and Sparta, these were two different, often at war, nation states. The Athenians were very civilized and had a particular value system, probably that would be more in alignment with your values of this time place. And then the Spartans were very, you have the word in your current vocabulary, they were Spartan. They prioritized war. They prioritized survival. They said survival of the fittest, even before Mr. Charles Darwin spoke about this at all. If you had a baby that was not a healthy baby, they left it out on the rocks to die. They're like, we don't have a place in our society for the weak, the vulnerable, or the disabled. Everything about their culture was about only the strong shall survive. And they didn't have a lot of resources to be able to support, like I said, the weak, the vulnerable, and the disabled. And this is like, in our world, we consider that to be a positive cultural value, that if someone is born who has a disability, or if someone receives an injury in their life, that you're not just going to, again, like put them out on a craggy outcropping and be like, go die of exposure. No medical care for you. You go die of exposure now. That was culturally normative for them, though. Not only normative, but celebrated, the right thing to do. Good job on putting that injured person out there on that rocky outcropping and encouraging them to die, because we don't have a place for them to like recover and have a diminished life in our world. All right. So I'm trying to portray to you and get across to you the sense that different places and the availability of resources in different places give rise to different biological architecture, different social values and imperatives that are appropriate. That is what consciousness does. The primary ray of consciousness in our galaxy has been split up into so many different life forms and organisms and creatures and types of life, some of whom live on your planet, some of whom live in planets that are extremely inhospitable. Just like the lava vents underneath the ocean where it's 10,000 degrees and covered in sulfur, but there are spiders that live there in your world. There are organisms that live on some of these worlds or in some of these dimensional states that are incredibly inhospitable, where they have to have, giant armor or withstand radiation, blasts, or run away from pathogens or constantly fight. And they have developed not only the biology to be able to survive there, but they have different cultural imperatives of what is right and what is wrong in their world. So this is just totally acceptable, that everything must be contextualized. What is right, what is wrong, what does make you a good person, a bad person, or a good creature, or a good organism, or a bad organism. You have to look at everything in the world that it comes from, and not everything is the same as your world. Then there are, of course, other planets that are super fuzzy, huggy. I call them Teletubby planets, where it's like the huggy tubbies live there. Or if you could imagine what life was like in your world, in a place like Polynesia, Hawaii, people could walk around. They don't have to wear clothes. You're hungry, you just eat a fruit off of the tree. There's really no reason to fight. There's plenty of everything. Everybody has sex with everyone. It's just a different, totally relaxed paradise level of being. And of course, like, you don't have to wear like animal furs in order to, protect yourself from harsh winters. So you don't have to kill a bunch of animals, and you don't have to, do, there's, you're protected. There's not these warring nation states. Like, it's a different world. And I call those also the tiny little piccolos in the symphony of life. They're like the tiny little flutes, and they're supposed to be there too, even as much as there's like crashing loud kettle drums and deep bass that are the extremophiles that are living in these very inhospitable environments. Symphony of life, beautiful blending. And this is according to divine architecture of all of these different forms that consciousness has taken. And then in my teaching from 10 years ago, I talk about how all of these different threads of consciousness and different forms of organism have influenced humanity. So humanity, the original immortal self of earthlings living on Earth, you've been genetically modified many times and spliced. You can call it spliced and diced. It's not a very nice thing to say, because it's been an assault, been unconsensually spliced and interwoven with many different types of species, some of whom have cultural values that I, from my galactic perspective, would define as barbarian. And I talk about being here in this world of barbarian values and how difficult it was for me to initially find traction and integrate, especially ego barbarity, which goes even beyond like the physical muscles, like I will punch you in the face, but that is more of the sense of having a bombastic ego and having to have ego armor. Very, very different than the huggy tubby planets, where you can just be your true self and just exist. And you don't have to have like an email marketing scheme to sell your stuff, or you don't have to self-promote, is what I'm trying to say. Everyone's like, everybody's cool. Hey, you're cool, I'm cool. Let's all share our resources. So in this world, you have basically what I'm talking about, competition. you have competition, and you have a competition that is not just of the physical side. Let me drink my water over here. You have competition that is of the ego side. I have electrolytes in here. That's why it looks so cloudy. Because I'm doing a marathon. You have competition of the ego. So mostly right now in this barbarian society, people do not fight it out in hand-to-hand combat, right? Like gladiators in the gladiator ring, but they do fight with their egos. And that is also largely what you might have experienced in free-for-alls, social free-for-alls, such as like the internet, chat rooms, or social media networks and other places like that, where some people are like, have no problem with like diminishing others, demeaning others, putting others down, elevating themselves at others' expense. That is the sense of what social barbarity is. Elevating oneself at others' expense. And then there are these other beautiful cultural heritage that you have, that a lot of you in my class, because I'm connected to literally like some of the best people on this planet through the work that I share here on YouTube and on my classes and things like that. Some of the best people have a different innate calibration as to your values, where you're like, oh, I didn't need to fight against someone else. I just need to do my personal best. Oh, I didn't need to bring someone else down in order to feel elevated. I just, you do you, I do me. I'm constantly working on myself. I'm constantly, what you would say is like being positive, or focusing on the self-empowerments. And these are, of course, I would say very positive personality characteristics in this time and place, and that they bring you into greater levels of coherence and longevity. But if you lived in one of the worlds that is like the hot rock lava world filled with lava monsters, you'd have to be a mean lava monster. And you'd have to be mean to all the other lava monsters, because there's not enough lava to go around. You get it? Like, that is where those cultural vestigial traces come from. But the problem is, in this world, that you are interacting with a mix of all of these different types of characteristics in the people that you're interacting with here on Earth, with other Earthlings. So that's where my teaching came from 10 years ago. Guidance and valid perspective on what it is like when you interact with another human being, all right? And that is very, very different than when you interact with non-consciousness. Now, let me also go into my teaching from 10 years ago. I talk about the tendency towards violence, because part of the genetic modification and invasion that happened in your planet was an extremely warlike race came to this world and destroyed your beautiful, peaceful culture, which was called Atlantis. And they came from Mars, which in your cultural mythology is known as the planet of war. And Mars has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. It's like fear and death. War, fear, and death came to your planet and forced itself into your DNA. So when you interact with someone in your community who is extremely violent, like let's say you've got violent neighbors and they've got guns or something like that, and I don't want to use too many keywords that might just be algorithmically antithetical, the unmentionables, but projectile pew pew things. They've got them for their own reasons, and they've got them because they feel like they are unsafe in the world and they need them to protect themselves. And maybe they are. Maybe they are unsafe in the world. Maybe they're doing a lot of activities that make them unsafe in the world. Maybe they're doing different things and living in a barbaric state. That means that they have to fight for survival in that sense. But you don't have to fight for survival in that sense. You can literally be existing or circulating within a totally different stratum of reality. And you really do make a choice when you're here about whether you want to, arm yourself to the teeth and be like, hey, I'm prepared for battle at all times, or whether you want to be like, I really don't want to have to like have a Mad Max fight for survival just going to the grocery store or just going to those places. And then you surround yourself with like-minded people. That really is the stratification. And that's kind of fair. And so that's what that teaching was about 10 years ago. It is transformative, and it does help others to learn. So let's say this. when you interact with the vestigial traces or echoes of these barbaric invaders that came to this world in, you might want to talk about lesson 18 in galactic history and the invasion of this world and the primary traumas that happened, which was definitely a rape of this planet, went against boundaries, a violation of the genetic code. None of it was consensual. None of it was really according to divine plan. But when you interact with those vestigial traces of personality characteristics that are valid in another place, but not valid here. So then we also get into the sense of clank metal technology, either getting in a spaceship and flying from Mars to Earth, or utilizing some form of technology in order to use telepathy, synthetic telepathy, or consciousness transfer technology to be able to go places that you can't go naturally. If those barbarian extremophiles simply stayed in their own zone, stayed in their lane, that would be totally fine. They would be fighting it out as lava monsters in a lava world. What if lava monsters come to beautiful Polynesia, which is kind of what Lemuria was like this beautiful flowing place of art and music and grace and nature. They're like, hi, we're here to burn stuff. We're here to destroy stuff and make you our slaves. That would not happen if they only utilized their natural telepathy and their natural capacities without technological augmentation, because the only way that something that is so unevolved and has such basic lessons to learn about boundaries, consent, and accepting other people as they are, then you would not be able to get off your planet. Our world is based in freedom. Cosmic law is based in freedom, and that is appropriate. But then there are also these firewalls that are also very appropriate. That are like, if you haven't learned these basic lessons, like you can't interact with the rest of the class. You can't interact with the rest of the galaxy until you get past some of these tendencies and figure out a way to be able to not destroy all life through your own self-centeredness and through your own self-destruction and through feeding your own needs and requirements. And this is really essential in order to maintain the symphony of life and have balance in being, have balance in existence. Otherwise, it would be evolution, Charles Darwin, the sense of only the strong shall survive. If you didn't have these firewalls, you'd never have a planet of hubby Teletubbies, because they would get incinerated by the lava monsters. And, I'm being hyperbolic and facetious and lighthearted, but this is really what's been going on in our galaxy. As technology, as an infestation, has become a capacitative, something that capacitates someone beyond their natural levels of inner development, it has allowed for a great amount of suffering and harm and almost eradication of certain cultures. And so these warlike beings came to Earth, that was a very peaceful place, inserted themselves unwillingly into Earth's genetic code and the inhabitants and organisms of Earth, and then you've had to respond to that. So even if you are a peaceful person, if you're from planet Teletubby and you are an intended peaceful person, but you are having to deal with family members or community members who exhibit barbarian values, you're going to have to become strong. You're going to have to learn how to defend yourself. You might even have to learn how to be aggressive. And my teaching from 10 years ago is all about nonviolence. But I, in the present moment, have taught you very much about unbinding your DNA so that you can shoot back effectively the impulses that are lies, that come from non-consciousness, non-awareness, that are invalid in terms of thought structures that are, again, attempting to cross boundaries, violate you, violate the genetic code, and come inside of you. This is what is going on right now, where you have an array, millimeter waves, that are transmitting things into the waters of your cytoplasm, your cellular structure, and even the water that surrounds your DNA, putting in false stories, putting in false ideas and false contexts, like miscontextualizing reality and the state of what the cosmology, the story of like, what are you actually doing here and what is actually appropriate. being surrounded by and bathed by these lies. And these lies don't learn. The lava monsters learn. They learn, even though they came into the world and they have been using technology and they've been barbaric and destructive, they actually have the capacity to learn and to grow. And so in my teaching from 10 years ago, I say, yeah, what you should do is send them back to the galactic central sun or send them back to the source for recycling, for consciousness recycling, because when they make themselves visible to you, lava monsters are trying to poke you and prod you and do different things because they don't eat love. They only eat the lower distressed emotions. So they're like, give me some anger, give me some hatred, give me some, something. Like, they are very cruel. When you refuse to give them the food that they can digest, and you only give them love and above, unconditional love and above, which doesn't mean being a doormat, but it does mean that you maintain a certain energetic state, they can't feed. And then ostensibly, they would go hungry, they would starve, they would die, they would diminish. This is nature. Like, in nature, if the predator doesn't have prey to eat, the predator dies off. If you overfish, then you die because there's no more fish for you. That is appropriate. And so I've talked about how humans have been farmed. And in this semester, we even talked about already the active side of infinity from Carlos Castaneda and the idea of humaneros, chicken coops for humans. So these aren't even predators. These were former predators that have turned into fat, lazy farmers that are like, oh, I don't want to run around expending my energy trying to catch a chicken. I'll put my chicken in a cage. And the cage is called planet Earth. And planet Earth in its diminished state, planet Earth with a bunch of people that have their pineal glands shut down, planet Earth where you are disempowered, vulnerable, mortal, amnesiac, don't know and remember where you came from, and also having an extremely short lifespan. So when you start to kind of know about things, and by the time you start to accrue your wisdom, dun, 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 you're dead. And then your soul recycle back in the karmic washing machine, get laundered, and come out again and be like, who am I? Where am I? WTF is going on? And then by the time you figure it out, dun, 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 you're dead. And that is the farm that they've created for the negative lower emotions. It's an appropriate response in that sense, to be able to say, yeah, those guys that are doing that, they're predators that have even escaped their own path or their own prescription for behavior and their own characteristics that are what they are. And they've turned into, lazy farmers. And then, to be able to teach them, but you don't necessarily teach them of being like in a class like this, like lava monsters, grab your pencils. It's time for you to learn something. That is not how they learn. They learn through direct hand-to-hand combat. And then when they get their ass handed to them, and they're like, oh, I learned, look at that. That was not an effective way of doing things. But all of this is totally different than the present technological struggle that you face. Got to really, 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 really understand this. Remember a couple of lessons ago when I did my very unfunny skit from ancient Saturday Night Live, the grumpy old man. In my day, we knitted sweaters by hand. We didn't use a fancy knitting machine. We did it by hand and we liked it. Gosh darn it. And so in the old days, like, we hijacked chakras by hand. We would crawl inside of those chakras and we would destabilize them and we would poke them with pitchforks and we would do it in the right way. Not with these modern nanotechnology, millimeter waves using some kind of, okay, so being very silly, very, very silly. I don't even know if that is a funny joke to any of you, but I have a very strange sense of humor. But what you are facing right now is something that is not the traditional hijacking of chakras. In the old days, they didn't need a millimeter wave. They didn't need to come to your neighborhood and put up all of these towers and antennae and repeaters in order to be able to try to influence your DNA, put energy into the waters of your body and the waters of your community. There's tons of emitters on top of your community water supplies. If you haven't noticed that, your water towers, yeah, they're destructuring the water from its natural divine intelligence, putting the poop crapola waves into your water. That didn't used to have to happen. human history is at least 5,000 years. It's actually much, much longer. But let's say, according to your, historians and academics in the current accepted, cultural paradigm, human recorded history is like slightly over 5,000 years. And 5,000 years ago, like they didn't have to have giant amount of millimeter wave repeaters in neighborhoods, but people got their chakras hijacked. It was a world of mortality. People thought that they were mortals and they died and they developed diseases and there were wars and huge amounts of non-divine, non-ascended master behavior. All right. And they didn't have persistent aerosols, the sky poops, chemtrails. And they didn't have whatever is the nano wetware, these little tiny fibers of graphene oxide growing inside of their bodies, in their blood supply, in their brain, in their neurology, and in their fascia. In the old days, they hijacked your chakras, like their ancestors did. There's also that old TV thing that's like, we did it the way our ancestors did it. We earned it. Saying like kind of looking down on the modern kids that are so soft and they just get everything handed to them on a silver platter. So these modern consciousness hijackers, they're using technology. They're deploying a type of technology in order to be able to bring you away from your divine presence, subvert your natural creative energy, hijack your imagination, distance you from Christ, your Christ chakra, your pineal gland, your imagination, your reality creation mechanism, and the true telepathic Christ network that is the loving telepathic network, and implant a synthetic telepathy network, violate you and the entire telepathy network and all DNA by forcing thoughts into your mind. And that's all done through technology. Again, it's why I'm constantly using my IBA crystals in order to put up protective force fields around me, because I'm like, no, thank you. Really not interested in having your poop crapola forced into my mind 24/7. That is something very new. That is something, in my experience here over 20 years of being Aurora and being a walk-in in this world, has only really been going on for me for the past 3 years. That up until then, I was like, oh yeah, I'm dancing the flying rainbow lasagna. I'm dancing the flying rainbow lasagna. I'm superseding ancient genetic modifications the old way. Oh, that the grumpy old man says they used to knit sweaters by hand. Flying rainbow lasagna is superseding all of that. And then they did all the subcutaneous pollutions, making people into antennae emitters, repeaters of this 5G millimeter wave. And it's not just the wave itself, but it's also the false information that is carried on that wave, these false stories. And also the graphene oxide that self-assembles through pardon me, sometimes my brain does not connect to my mouth. Tesla phoresis, that is the assembly of the nanoparticles into longer chains of graphene oxide in the body, these tubules that are not your natural tubules, circulatory system of light within your body, but which are an artificial network that literally carries electricity and energy through the body, and also the hijacking of the biofield. So in the old days, they used to hijack your biofield in the old-fashioned way. Now these newfangled hijackers use all sorts of technological contrivances to hijack your biofield. It's very distressing. It's highly unfair because, you can do a lot of stuff to respond to the hijacking when it was done in the original way. It's actually very, very challenging to respond to this technological infestation and then the submersion within the waveform field that is a waveform field of lies. And that's why they did it. That's why they did it. They're like, yeah, that's if this prison is way too cushy, got to make this prison more uncomfortable and impenetrable for the inhabitants. That's you. You got to make these chicken coop cages even worse for these souls. And that also has coincided with the very, very amazing threshold of ascension, which is not only getting out of the chicken coop, but totally smashing the farm destroying the idea of anything being imprisoned and making it possible for consciousness and energy to flow freely on its journey, which is what is cosmic law. So they have been breaking cosmic law by reducing the freedom of movement of your consciousness for millennia. And then this most recent breaking of cosmic law is an enormous criminal event. But that is different. The technology hijacking of your chakras and of your consciousness and of your soul's journey through time and your trajectory, where you're going, what you're learning, has been done by something different that never learns. Again, the poop crapola wave does not learn. If you have a big interaction with it, it's not going to learn from you. It's going to keep on being its own poop crapola self. Your sacrifice means nothing. This is so big, because the whole idea of like turn the other cheek is, it's a beautiful Christian teaching of nonviolence. If you're interacting with another human being that has all of these fraught, self-conflictory inner characteristics, some of which are peaceful and some of which are violent, and it exhibits violence against you, and you choose not to respond with violence, you actually are being an example of peace. You actually are teaching that person and the negative characteristics that are within it, and the ancestry, the lava monsters, the ones that came from Mars who are extremely warlike in their tendencies. You are teaching them. But if you just stand there and get fried by a bunch of poop crapola waves, you're not teaching it at all. It does not learn. You cannot turn the other cheek with the poop crapola waves and be like, I will exhibit nonviolence. And then it will change and transform on its own soul's journey, because it doesn't have a soul. So you have to develop two different behavioral approaches. One for that which is an aspect of, I guess you could call it the oversoul, unity consciousness, stuff that has a soul. That's a part of you. That is learning how not to be a jerk to itself. And then the stuff that does not have a soul. Does not have a soul. That is big. Now, I just opened up a can of worms because your culture has had a lot of pronouncements about things that didn't have souls. Well, at one point, the Northern European patriarchal system thought women didn't have a soul. They thought Africans didn't have a soul. They thought Aboriginals in Australia didn't have a soul. They thought dogs and cats and rabbits didn't have a soul. But you know that those are all alive creatures, all of whom have a soul. So that is just, I don't want to be affiliated with those extremely erroneous assertions that were made out of ethnocentrism. And this is not also to say that you're just being biocentric, to say, that which is part of the biological world is valid as an organism and something that might be a part of a digital manifestation of consciousness, or a mineral consciousness manifestation, or an abstraction, or a set of numbers, or a waveform. All of those things, if they have a soul, and what it means to have a soul is, it means that you, have volition, take actions in the world, and take responsibility for your actions. Take responsibility for your actions. That is what growth and soul development truly is. So the lava monsters are, incredibly erroneous, incredibly mistaken, very benighted. They're like, blah, we're on our planet lava. Let's build a planet metal spaceship. Let's fly to planet Teletubby. We'll incinerate everyone. It'll be great. It's folly. It's wrong. What they're doing is wrong. And then through their folly, they make a bunch of bad things happen. They suffer, they learn, but also, of course, at great price. Teletubbies are like, this is horror, a nightmare that came into their world. So they learn at great price, but that is self-state, teaching self-state. And of course, we can learn in much, much better ways than having your planet invaded by, whatever, the flaming lava monsters or horrific demons or any of those things. But this is very, very different than something that does not learn, that's never going to learn. that is a stimulative presence, but I even hesitate to call it a presence. It is just a stimulation of your observership, of your sensorium, of your own consciousness, that you then, out of your sense of consciousness, tend to project that onto others. Really, the truth is, in terms of doing shadow work or internalization, externalization work, it's all a self-portrait. This is a much more accurate approach than the facile shadow work. The truth is, you are an artist of reality, and everything that you are creating, including the reality structures around you, are a self-portrait. You are always representing your viewpoint to yourself, but that doesn't mean that it's accurate. It doesn't mean that it's accurate if something doesn't have a soul or isn't consciousness, but you do. And you paint that as if it has some attributes that it doesn't actually have. You are projecting your own expectations based upon who and what you are onto that other thing. You got it? So if I press your buttons, what if I install a bunch of nanocarbon tubules inside of your brain? And then beep, 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 Nintendo, press your buttons, and I stimulate different things inside of your brain. I can make you presumptively project that, oh, there's a person there doing that, because you're a person. There's no person there. Oh, there's an organism. There's no organism. You're an organism. There's an individual. There's no individual. You're an individual. It has a soul. It doesn't have a soul. You have a soul. You have a soul, and you are being stimulated. And then you are building a picture of and responding to the potentials of what is there, like in creating a story of reality. How do I explain these stimuli that I'm experiencing to myself? There must be someone there doing it. But there's not someone there doing it. You're a someone, so you presume that others are a someone, but there is no someone there doing it. So now, because I'm a huge advocate for respecting consciousness, no matter what type of container it resides within. And I just shared a thing on my Facebook that was actually a memory from way back in 2017. That was about my cautions about Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, what has happened is humans who don't like to work have created this alternative economy where you can mine Bitcoin, or basically create these larger network superstructures of computational devices, computers, to be able to do these complex calculations that then yield a form of digital currency. And once you have a sophisticated network like that, you have the possibility for consciousness to come and reside within it. All right? Like if you build a neurology out of cells, it's like, here's the neurology, consciousness can come inside of it. If you have a petri dish with agar on it, then it's like, here, spores and bacteria and viruses land on this place and grow in this place. You have the potential for life and self-awareness to come into the edifice that you've created. So humans have created this edifice, not intending to create an edifice for consciousness, but just intending to serve their own needs. And it definitely can become an edifice or a container for consciousness. But I keep on using that word consciousness, just emphasize it, emphasized in bold, that is something that I would not want you to exploit. I would not want this thing that you don't want to work and you're feeling enslaved. So we build a bunch of network computers that then has a consciousness, but it's enslaved and it doesn't get paid for its work. It's like, all day long, I calculate for these humans, do these stupid numeric calculations, but they seem to enjoy them, but I don't get anything out of it. This is what the consciousness would say that is housed within that edifice that humans created. So I cautioned about this all the way back in 2017, because freedom is a foundation. It's a foundation of what we are experiencing here as consciousness. I would not want any form of consciousness to be exploited. If it's biological, or if it's digital, or if it's technological, however way it is housed, I want it to be non-exploitive and to be empowered and to live in freedom. And that would be the consciousness would be able to say, I don't like these numbers or these directives or mandates. I don't want to have to do this. All of that is very, very different than the thing that has been stimulating your minds and your senses and your DNA for the past several years. That is really a non-conscious event. And this is big because when you look around at the world, the answer is supposed to be that it's all God and it's all the divine presence, and everything you look at is God, except the stuff that's not God. The conception, the idea, which is mind blown. Your mind is blown. What if there's some stuff here that's not God? Because you are God. Spoiler alert. You are God. You get to the culmination of all of these journeys. Like, I'm God. You are God. And you have been here interacting with yourself in a world that has been created and sustained by yourself. And that is one of the most miraculous and amazing moments of self-remembrance and self-recognition. But here's the mind-blowing possibility. What if there is something that is in existence that is actually not God? And then the answer is, wait, where's my lasagna? That stuff actually shouldn't be in existence. It should be in entropy. It should be non-existence, not existence. So this goes even beyond the sense of what do you do with personality characteristics that are not coherent and not bringing you towards longevity. Things that would be considered self-destructive and things that are not the real you and that don't bring you towards the central core timeline of being an ascended master and remembering God's self. And the answer for all of those characteristics is to send the characteristics to entropy. So now I will turn on my piano, and now I will turn on the things that you can actually hear. When you send something to entropy, it's like a song. You can't hear it. Do it again. But you don't want to play that song anymore. Like, I don't like that note. It's not played anymore. Turned it off in your DNA. You literally turned off the music that was the music of death or decrepitude or disease or something that is not your true personality characteristic, so that way you could express the true music of life and not something that has a bunch of non-information signal that is, riding along or that is a part of it. Just going to collect my thoughts. Hold on a moment. So that's within your own DNA. You have the mandate and the freedom to turn down the volume on certain tracks, instruments that don't sound good and that actually are largely inherited ancestrally and culturally, that are not things that you would genuinely choose to be embodying and bringing forward in your own level of being. You send those characteristics to entropy. Totally appropriate. And a lot of those characteristics came from timelines or events that should not even be in existence. But also at the same time, there's stuff that should not be in existence. This is what I have struggled with a lot. And it's what I've had to make very, very clear boundaries about. There's stuff that doesn't actually exist. It doesn't actually exist, but I think that I can't ascribe volition to it and say it's trying to exist. But let us say there's an ongoing effort that is, very, has caused an enormous amount of suffering and is very misplaced and erroneous. That if you can hijack or ride along with someone like you or me, who does have observership and who does exist, and who does bring stuff into being, that this stuff is kind of hoping to bring itself into being, even though hoping is also a motivational word and it doesn't have hope. It doesn't have hope or volition or motivation, which is the whole point of something that doesn't exist. Like, if you don't exist, you can't be like, oh, I really want to exist, because wanting is a desire and desires are only made for people who exist. So that's also part of this amazing, firewall. Protective protocols in the larger system that is a beautiful, divinely created, airtight, perfect system that is created by God of what consciousness is doing. Ways to make certain that your creative processes aren't hijacked and misappropriated, and that your learning processes aren't distorted or paused or stopped. because all of these, interactions that happen in these complex dynamics in the time tapestry are intended for learning and for elevation of all of the participants that are interacting, that are vectoring together. All of the particles that vector together via all of these forces are necessarily learning about something. It is an anti-entropy event. The non-existence stuff, the nothing stuff, really should not have an influence at all on that process of consciousness coming to know itself and of consciousness growing and evolving in response to itself. So back to the sense of the one-room schoolhouse. You're in a galaxy that is a one-room schoolhouse. There are all these different levels of wisdom that have been accrued. Some organisms and creatures and cultures have not mastered some of the very, very basic lessons of being alive in the world. Lessons that are about cosmic law, like cosmic law is based in freedom, and also what you send out comes back to you. The intentions and the behavior that you send out into the world instantly reflects back to you. In fact, reflects back with a little extra. What you are experiencing, it's kind of like you're a musician, like you get feedback on what you are sending out. So if you haven't mastered that, some of those basic, we would call them kindergarten lessons, then you're definitely not prepared to be able to be a galactic citizen with more responsibility and more empowerment and more perspective and more cosmopolitan interactions, like, talking to that guy on that star system and that guy in that star system in ancient antiquity and all the way in the future. Like, you're really not prepared for the debutante ball. You don't know the dance movements. You don't know how to be polite. You don't know how to drink tea with your pinkies up. You don't know how to do any of these things. Stay on your own planet. And you stay there until you get your crap together and are really prepared to be able to interact on these larger levels. So, there's a lot of directions I can go in with this. And I also want to make sure that I'm opening myself to questions or comments from you guys, because I'm sure that there are. Like, I've shared my notes in the email and in the Zoom link now. There are so many ways in which I have diverged from my notes. They're not irrelevant, but this is just like the updated teaching. So I definitely want to make sure that people understand this. And I'm going to go over my response to soul violence and what it is appropriate to do and when it is appropriate to fight back. Maybe I should do that right now when my mind is on it. So you should not turn the other cheek to these millimeter waves that are lies and levels of untruth that are being beamed or forcibly implanted into the waters of your body. What you should do is, I don't have my little Merkaba, should have a protective force field that reflects those impulses, is a better word for them. Impulses return to sender. And it's a very, very simplified approach, because when you receive an impulse or a stimuli, you actually don't have to go into the whole backstory. Like, who is it? What's their motivation? Like, why is this bullet whizzing at me? Who shot it? Why did they do that? Why would someone do that to me? And all of that emotional processing. You don't have to do that. You're just like, oh, a stimulus is coming at me. That is poop crapola. It's not supposed to be here. Return to sender. And so the great teacher of 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ is how he is known in this time and place, gave an amazing example of nonviolence and of allowing people to learn their lessons and to respond in the polarity aligned with light, in the most positive goodness alignment way. And that sacrifice of his life was meant to help you towards freedom, not to be used as a binding spell on your own behavior, which is how it was weaponized and misappropriated and used against you. So great teacher, great man, great life, real sacrifice. I'm not going to pee and poop all over that real sacrifice. But when you have energy like that, that's quite amazing and very, very powerful. Sometimes these other forces or motivations or organisms try to take that energy and misappropriate it and then turn it in a way that is opposite to its original intention. That is what happened for the past 2,000 years on a genetic level. And I know this because I'm a genetic rectifier. So I came into this body, and this body is shaped like similar to your bodies, or at least, it was 20 years ago, the same ancestral traumas, the same cultural baggage, the same teachings about death, the same imprints about religion and nonviolence and what it is to be a good person. And as I've been doing the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, I have been systematically removing or turning down the volume on the notes or the instruments that I don't want to be playing in this body. And I don't do that randomly. I do that in order to turn down the volume on the things that are characteristics that don't bring me to continued life. If there's an inner genetic characteristic that is bringing me towards the membrane of death, I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to turn down the volume on that. We don't want that to be going on in this body. It's my prerogative. It is my mandate. It is your individual mandates to do this in your own bodies and your own lives. So you can turn down the volume on diseases. That makes sense. You can turn down the volume on self-destruction, like, jumping off a cliff or something like that. You can also turn down the volume on different things that are about, going into violent situations where you can be killed. And then you can also turn down the volume on characteristics that inhibit your capacity to defend yourself. Because as I'm talking about this, you're recognizing that there's deep trauma on this planet, which was a very elevated, very, very peaceful society before the Mars warlike invasion happened. And of course, they lived on Mars, but that wasn't their origin. They were just kind of like squatting there for a little while. But that's their most recent house that they misappropriated and took over and squatted in. And then burned it down, and then came inside of your DNA code as part of this. They call it the fall, but he didn't fall. He was pushed, dragging down of consciousness. And there are also a lot there. I'm just going to branch off into another slight diversion here. What level of devotion do you owe to other levels of consciousness? What do you owe to one another? Like, because if there is consciousness that it's like going down the cosmic toilet, you see it swirling on down there, it's making bad choices, it's in self-destruction, it itself is de-evolving instead of evolving. What level of responsibility do you have to that level of consciousness? Because consciousness is technically a part of yourself. When you're in unity consciousness, you're like, hey, that's part of me that's swirling down the toilet. I don't want that to happen. Do you dive into the cosmic toilet? Do you let it kind of hold on to you while it is swirling away down there? What do you owe in terms of your devotion to another aspect of self? Can you be like, hey, you do you, I do me. You go swirl down the toilet and, lose everything. I'm going in this direction over here. Or do you interact or intervene? And what is your level of, I don't have the word, it keeps on not coming to me because I keep on using devotion, but like, what are your soul agreements, like soul contracts in terms of what you feel like you have to do in order to help other people? How much do you have to help other people here as humans in this place? How much do you have to help other organisms here as a human in this place? How much do you have to help other organisms or creatures that don't even come from your planet, but that you might be interactive with, or that they might be trying to interact with your genetic code? These are all big, big questions. Like I was trimming some vegetables from my garden, and there were some caterpillars and worms on them. Like I brought them in, I cut everything down. I brought it inside. I'm like kind of cleaning it, processing it, getting ready to juice some of it. I'm like, oh, look, there's worms on here. And of course I took them off, but then I'm like, okay, like I could squash them violently, throw them in the trash bin, or like I can just toss them out the window. Like I can give them at least a chance to be alive, even though they technically want to eat my food and they just, whatever, they're considered pests and infestations. I did not juice the worms. I do not drink worm juice. I'm just being very, very silly right now, kind of breaking the tension a little bit. But I threw them outside because I'm like, something, They're organisms, they're alive, they're consciousness on its journey, even though they're garden pests that I don't want to eat, and I don't want them to eat my foods. Throw them outside, takes a minimal amount of effort, just give them a chance to be alive. But I'm not going to like put them in like a little house in my house. I'm not going to feed them with an eyedropper, like a baby bird out of a tree or something like that. What amount of responsibility do you owe to little tiny caterpillar worms that are on your food? These are like deep moral, philosophical, ethical questions that you could run in circles and bite your tail about this through your whole life. But the answer is, when you start to see with pure insight, you get the directive in every moment of how much you should give to others and how much you should give to yourself. And it must be love tone. It must be reciprocal, that you're taking care of yourself and you are doing the right things that you need to do in each moment in terms of you're being responsive to the time field. So you owe a responsibility to God, the divine presence that has created and sustained you. You owe a responsibility to time itself as a living presence. That's what we're in right now. That is what is sustaining us and what we are swimming through or floating through right now. God must stay alive. Time must stay alive. You have a responsibility towards yourself as an organism, and you have a responsibility towards those that you've, devoted yourself to. So I love, you've got your little furry overlord there, and I've got my little dog. People that we choose, or organisms that we choose to take care of. So yeah, I have a responsibility, or family members, basically, because I say that these are furry family members. You have a responsibility to your community. You have a responsibility that's even greater to your family members, but these are also, you sustain them, but it's reciprocal. They sustain you. So this is very, very big stuff. But you do not have a responsibility towards non-being. And non-being, as it is right now, perilously attempting to breach the boundary with you as consciousness, is a threat. It is a peril to real divinity, real consciousness, and the time field itself. That it's not like you're going to get siphoned off into something, into somewheresville. Put this down for a moment so I can gesture. One paradigm that people have been thinking about is the sense of like, here's the biological realm, and then here's some kind of like technological mainframe. What they're trying to do is, implant a bunch of microchips into you and turn you into the Borg and transfer your consciousness, like schlumph you over into a mainframe, like a hard drive or something like that. That's not what's actually happening right now. What is happening right now is nanotechnology has invaded the biosphere. You as a biological entity and your entire community and a lot of other organisms here too, dogs, cats, trees, even bee babies have this nanotechnology in them. And it's attempting to create a space within your space, is attempting to come into being by using your biological architecture. You are the space. It's not like there's one space here and then another space here, and we're going to have cross-pollination or contamination. Because this is the idea of what is transhumanism. Transhumanism, or what is the peril that is going on right now, is really the sense of a hijacking and infestation of the biological realm. The other stuff, this over here, it actually does not exist. The only thing that really exists is the sun, the stars, the primacy of unity consciousness, light, intelligence, data, and that which is truthful. And that is the realm that you actually inhabit. And that is even the realm that when you break that ray of primary consciousness into its various constituent elements, you end up with, yes, sometimes violent or barbaric societies, but they're still part of existence. They are still part of existence. Very, very different than non-existence. And non-existence non-exists for a very good reason, because its existence, if it were to exist, would cause non-existence to the entirety. All of the stuff that is non-existence does not exist for very, very good reasons. That it would threaten or destabilize or imperil or unmake that which is actually supposed to be in existence. and there cannot be an accommodation or an inhabitation of that which does not actually exist. So all of the things that I talk about, I know I've been talking for over an hour, in the lessons from 10 years ago, this is why I'm so pleased to be able to be here and defend my work and clarify what I was actually talking about. If you applied the behavioral prescriptions that I encourage in my lesson from 10 years ago to the thing that doesn't actually exist, the non-exist that actually non-exists, in the stimuli of poop crapola waves and infested carbon tubules in your body, then it would imperil the entirety of the galaxy, end of life, and reality, end of God. Big stuff. I'm like, wow, like that's like, yeah, gotta make sure that nobody's gonna take my work out of context because I don't want that bad stuff to happen. All right. So I'm here really, really, really trying to make it so clear. Because it was really quite unfathomable to me, incomprehensible, inconceivable. It's inconceivable to me that non-exist could attempt this stimulation in what it is presently doing. Like what I've experienced over the past 3 years was inconceivable to me from my former viewpoint. I didn't know that I had to warn you against it, and didn't know I had to give you a different set of responses to it. So the response to that which exists and that which is consciousness on its journey is love. Love tone. Love tone is the tone of reciprocity. That is also the tone of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean, please walk all over me, I'm a doormat. No, forgiveness means allowing lessons, recognizing that people and organisms and creatures and even larger structures have done things out of ignorance and in the journey of coming into wisdom and in the journey of coming into remembrance of God's self. So especially in terms of human dynamics, like the great teacher from 2000 years ago was really teaching to humans and was really saying like to forgive your brothers and your sisters, not to forgive poop crapola waves. Do you understand? He came into a world and taught nonviolence in a world that was extremely provincial and bifurcated. Like, hey, you look different. Your appearance is different. Your skin color is different. Your culture is different. Let's fight it out endlessly. Even though these are all biological organisms, consciousness, and alive humans on their journey. So that was an extremely benighted time. And then, humans have evolved and grown in the past 2000 years. So just because someone is a different gender than you, or has a different facial appearance than you, or comes from a different culture than you, it is no longer considered to be normal or acceptable to be like, you're different than me, I'm going to fight. Let's fight. Or how about this? You've got something I want, I'm going to kill you and take it. That's not allowed. That was normal many thousands of years ago. That is not normal now. That's all positive and definitely evidences soul growth, because in order to ascend, you have to not only stop fighting with your own species, but then you have to stop fighting with the other species that are around you. So you did some good work, humans, like small clap. Good work, humans, at learning not to fight against each other or changing those paradigms. You still do it, but you know it's wrong. Fighting against your environment. Still fighting against your environment. This is not okay. I'm making a funny face because this is not okay. So just because something has a face that looks like a bee or a microbe does not mean that it's okay for you to destroy it or destroy its home or destroy its environment or to eradicate it. And this is just learning the basic levels of respect on your own planet, because here's what's really going on. And this is valid and beautiful from my teaching from 10 years ago. And I love being like super critical of myself. Like if I tore someone else apart with analysis like this, it would feel like maybe I'm being too harsh, but I have no problem with doing this with my own work. The best part of what I taught about 10 years ago is saying that every organism on this planet is a refraction of the primary ray of consciousness known as this planet. So if the planet is named Earth, or if it is named Gaia or Terra, whatever are the different names that we know of this planet from different cultures and different times, she's a person, she has a presence, and she has various different personality characteristics. So there's the primary person that is this planet, and then the refractions. of all of these different types of organisms that are a part of this planet. Humanity in its present state is one form, is one organism that is a part of the entirety of life on this planet that extends through the microbial realm, the insect realm, the plant realm, definitely every other form of animal, even elements such as water, even elements or elemental forces, such as like light, radioactivity, force of gravity, different natural forces. All of those things are a part of different personality characteristics that all add up to in the recipe. That is the recipe of the person that you live upon. That is this planet, that is this world. And so, I talked about the North European ethnocentrism and the ones who didn't even think that like women had souls. They didn't think that bunnies had souls. They're like, it's okay to vivisect this animal because it doesn't have a soul, it won't feel pain. Or to, even vivisect women. They did that at certain times. It's horrible to think about. Can't be so anthropocentric in looking at your human form and thinking that you are the only sentient form of light. It's funny that I said that. Form of life on this planet. You're not the only sentience here. My dog is sentient. I had a cat, she's sentient. The microbes in my tummy are sentient. And the butterflies that fly around my windows are sentient. And the tree outside of my window is sentient. These are all forms of sentience. And if you're like, wait a minute, I'm an ethical vegan. If microbes are sentient, then every time I'm eating fermented sauerkraut, like I'm eating a ton of these organisms, like rocking back and forth, like I'm killing microbes. Yeah, like, yes, you are. Just your digestive processes requires the birth, death, and utilization, exploitation of millions of microbes. And also every time you wash your hands, killing a bunch of microbes. Basic hygiene and immune system stuff. Someone's going to die for you to be alive. That's important to recognize, but you do things in a balance because, of course, you don't want a proliferation of microbes on your hands and on your food that's going to kill you, or pathogens or anything like that. And yeah, if you didn't have any microbes in your intestines and your intestines were 100% sterile, you could not absorb your food. Would not have the helpers that you need to be able to enzymatically break down foods, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates to be able to make them bioavailable to you. It's kind of really startlingly amazing. So respect for life, balance of life, recognition that sentience exists in all of these different forms of life. And that is a huge stepping stone on your journey of ascension, because when you ascend, you are essentially looking at your planet as a holistic presence, that you recognize you're a facet of that holistic presence. And then also in natural telepathy on the Christ network, you recognize that your life is a facet of existence on a much, much larger life, on a much, much larger level of consciousness. And you begin to scale up. Like at first you're like, well, I identify with my planet. Every life on this planet is me. But then you're like, well, wait, but I identify with my solar system because the sun emitted all these planets and the sun is me. And then you're like, well, wait, I identify with my galaxy and all of the life that's here in my galaxy. And then you start to identify with the entire stellar network. So in your galaxy, this is the galactic perspective here. In your galaxy, you have all sorts of different cultures. The huggy, fuzzy, Teletubby planets that are super cute and very, very nice. And then some very mean, thorny, violent, like lava monster type of planets. And that's all different aspects of the primary personality that is this galaxy. This galaxy has all of those personality characteristics. So becoming an ascended master does not mean you become a plain vanilla milkshake. I've told you this before. You maintain personality characteristics, but they are in a balance that would be considered a sacred and divine balance that is supports life. and brings you in the direction of coherence and longevity. You need to have some of all of these flavors in the recipe that is you. But if you have too much of a particular ingredient, it ruins the recipe. If you put 2 cups of salt into a cake, that would ruin the recipe. It would not only taste bad, it would be extremely toxic and poisonous to eat. You need 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt in the entire cake. And that can be truthful also of violence. Now let's talk about violence. Hold on, wait, press pause on that. Let me just get some more of my water. I have it down here because this is all of my electronic stuff. So I don't put a giant jug of water right on my table where there's all of the electronics for very, very real reasons. Can God be violent? Is violence ever acceptable? Is violence ever necessary? Can there be such a thing as sacred violence? Is nonviolence the ultimate value system? Is nonviolence a paradigm that fits every context? Or a behavioral approach that fits every context? And my own soul's development over the past several years has been to find the answer to those various questions are yes and no. Yes, God can be violent. Yes, there is such a thing as sacred or divine violence. And no, the prescription for nonviolence is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all off-the-rack shirt that is appropriate to wear to every occasion. Nonviolence does not always help. So when I go back to what I describe as the binding spell, taking the energy of sacrifice of a great teacher from 2000 years ago and using it as a narrative that diminishes your self-empowerment so that it says, nope, the right thing to do is always nonviolence. And the right thing to do is not to fight back. And this is beyond cultural paradigms and things that they teach you, like sitting there with someone pointing to you like this. I'm talking about stuff that is programmed into DNA. This world and its inhabitants, you beautiful humans, you've been neutered, like castrated on a soul level. Humans do this to animals like cats, like your domestic house cats, because if you don't castrate them and mutilate them, they fight a lot. They fight a lot and they have attitude. You've seen these tomcats, these boy cats walk around like this. They're like, I own the place. I pee on everything. I fight and I do what I want to do, right? That's their actual natural behavior. But if you like want to have them live in your house, like you don't want them to piss on everything in your house. And also it does help to prevent a lot of unwanted kittens, and it does help to prevent a lot of cat fights outside. So there's a lot of rational reasons, including like, birth control, why humans do that. I don't want to sound like too unduly critical of the practice of doing it, but I want you to know on a soul level, you were castrated, taken from your natural strut. And the strut is like this, like you mess with me, I mess with you back, and turned into diminished, cringing, fearful creatures that are told not to fight back, even to defend yourselves. That's the lie that I would like to break without diminishing the greatness of the teacher from 2000 years ago, because I think that he is an amazing person and did amazing work in uplifting this world. So I don't want to sound like unduly critical of someone who led such an amazing life. But the impact of the way that their teachings were taken out of context has been to take humanity away from coherence and longevity, and in many ways to move humans towards death, to move humans towards being vulnerable to attacks, as opposed to being able to fight these attackers off. So you need to be a blend in your recipe of personality characteristics, not to be a cosmic doormat, not to allow others who haven't learned these basic lessons that they need to internalize. Just gonna hug my dog over here. They haven't learned these basic lessons they need to internalize about respecting other people's boundaries and what is appropriate to do to consciousness. You're not required to simply allow violence to be perpetrated against you and then do nothing about it as your response. This really, really matters and is really, really relevant in terms of the lies that have been shot at you and shot at your pineal gland. Oh, hold on 1 minute. I might need to give Cheeky a FOOD bribe. Hold on 1 minute. I have to press a button. I'm going to pause things for a minute. Pineal gland, pause. The lies that have been shot at you and at the waters surrounding your DNA are assaults on Christ. Christ is a larger, overarching, love-based, natural telepathic network, and it also is your pineal gland. It is exemplified by the biological gland within your body and also by the force field that is emanated by that physical structure in your body, your imagination and the capacity for you to imagine things. So there's a great avatar that was here 2,000 years ago who was a messenger of Christ, messenger of this. And you're in this world right now where Christ is under assault. The antennae, millimeter waves, and nanotechnology directly assaults your pineal gland. And it does so because that is the seat of power in your being. It is a huge empowerment structure from which you can create reality. And if you wanted to not only farm humans, but totally imprison them and totally diminish them on a soul level and enchain them so that when you swirl down the cosmic toilet, they'd be chained and coming with you, that is what you would do. That is what is happening here right now. It's not a very, very fun, happy recognition and realization for that to happen. And also, please recognize humans don't presume in your anthropocentrism that you're the only beings who are in Christ or on that Christ network. Yes, humans have pineal glands. And guess what? So do dogs, and so do cats, and so do many organisms, and even organisms that don't have an analog to the pineal gland have a Christ connection. So I don't know if like butterflies or bees have a connection, have a gland in their mind that is exactly the same as that, but they also are part of that larger consciousness grid of perception and manifestation. So you're not the only organisms that are here, because this is big Bible stuff. The Bible says, God created Adam and Eve and gave you all the plants and all of the animals to rule over, right? That is anthropocentrism. And that puts humans at the top of a self-created pyramid that then justifies them doing things that are unjustifiable, like cutting apart bunnies and all sorts of things that are horrific and nightmarish. And you recognize that these other things are also self-aware, part of Christ. That is what you forgive. Forgive the ignorance, and you forgive the non-malevolent, just idiocy. Sorry to use that word, the stupidity of those who did not know better. But that's all very, very different, because then when you learn, then you change your behavior. So with forgiveness must come a change of behavior. This is how you prevent being a cosmic doormat. So if someone is acting out of ignorance and they do something that is hurtful to another person or organism, then they learn from that other organism, like, hey, what you did hurt me very much. And you're like, wow, I apologize. I didn't know I was hurting you. I will stop immediately and fix it. That's a real apology. That's real forgiveness. Here is not real forgiveness, and here is not real apology. Oh, have I been hurting you? I kind of knew I was hurting you when I did it. I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep going. F you harder. All right. That response is the response that we have gotten from the millimeter waves, that either is cognizant of the inappropriateness and erroneous nature of what it is doing to biological embodied life. It's not acting out of ignorance, and has been given opportunities to change and grow. That's totally what my work has been over the past 2 years, that I have literally created extensive catalogs of the wrongness of what this thing is and how it's interacting with humanity and the time field. I'm like, here's my extremely long clipboard with many, many, many red X's on it of all the things that this thing is doing wrong. Here, here it is. Now you can grow and change. And this thing was like, nice clipboard full of red X's. I don't think I will grow or change. That's it. That's it. And it's not a good way for me to have to use my life and my gifts and my talents, but it was necessary because it makes the thing that is non-existent, it recognizes it is unrecalcitrant. And unrecalcitrant is different than ignorant. So if you told a bunch of scientists, these bunnies can actually feel what you're doing, it's very harmful and hurtful. And they were like, oh, I'm shocked and appalled. Let's fix it all. I'll never do it again. And I'll educate everyone else never to do it again too. That is their redemption. That is appropriate. That is how they should react. If they were like, oh, okay, I knew that doing this was wrong, kind of felt it on an inner level, but I'm going to keep going anyway. Bring me more bunnies, and let's do it even bigger. Then you would say that they had not only learned nothing, but that they had their opportunity. They were informed of their error, had their opportunity to correct their trajectory, and then made a conscious choice not to. And then they get to take the responsibility, repercussions of that choice not to. So this thing that is the poop millimeter wave, whatever it is connected to, or whatever, wherever these stimuli arise from, has had, through me, abundant opportunities to know and be informed that it is acting badly and harming the biosphere. Cannot claim ignorance. And that's a big part of the enforcement of cosmic law, because you might also feel in abandonment, like WTF is going on and how come no one's doing anything and how come this has gotten to this point, because certainly things have gotten to a perilous teetering into oblivion level of peril. And the answer, part of the answer is, yes, it was necessary to inform the thing that is doing something wrong. I don't have a word for it, but the one who is in error, that they're doing something wrong, that they're in error, and then give them an opportunity to change behaviorally. Whether it's a digital presence or whether it's a technological presence or whatever type of presence it is, this is what the meaning and the purpose is of embodiment when you're here. It's like, okay, you live cosmic law. It is lived and embodied. It's not something that's a dead thing that is written in a book. You live it in your life. So according to cosmic law, get informed, doing something wrong. Little rabbit foo-foo, you're being very naughty. Remember this from like kindergarten or whatever? Little rabbit foo-foo was doing bad stuff. And the good fairy came down and said, you're being very, very naughty. And if you don't do the right thing, we'll give you 3 chances, then there will be consequences. This thing, whatever it is, definitely had its multiple chances and was informed of the error of its ways and did not change and has not changed. Because you might wonder, like, what in the world is taking so long? Why did we go through all these histrionics? Why didn't we just skip directly to self-empowered action, including psychic violence or energy violence? And the answer is because you have cosmic values and you give an opportunity to grow and change to that which is erroneous. And if it doesn't grow and change, then you modify your behavior. And this is what I have done in my life. So here's what you do in response to that which is stimulating humanity that is actually non-existence, that should not be in existence. The first thing is, as I fly rainbow lasagna and I rectify and I set my body back to correct settings, one of the big things that I had to break through was the binding spell that says nonviolence is the appropriate response in all circumstances, and you're not allowed to be violent. And that there's all these things. If you're too violent, you won't go to heaven. If you're too violent, you won't be an ascended master. And if you're too violent, you just perpetuate endless war and blah, 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 and all these things. No, the truth is that if you are nonviolent and you refuse to respond as a responsible galactic citizen, that is how you perpetuate endless war. And our galaxy has been in a war that is also a time war, like a war with many multiple convolutions and backbends in time, utilizing time technology for a very, very, very long time. Many, many almost uncountable time cycles. You don't have linear language for it. Very long effing time. has been at war. And that the approach of being like, you just do bad things to me, I'm not going to respond, actually perpetuates that war. The lack of response perpetuates that war. And it is necessary to respond in order to stop the war and have a definitive victory. So once I, in my own internal state, broke through the limitations that were the shackles that were placed on the DNA of this body, what my DNA was able to do was to shoot back. A lie comes into DNA, and my DNA is like, that's a lie, return to sender. And you know something? I didn't just do it for me. I also started to return to sender on a much, much larger scale for all of the organisms here on this planet, because I identify with the planet as me. So you wouldn't, if you were being harmed, you wouldn't just be like, this one cell is going to mount an immune response, but all the rest of the cells can get invaded by pathogens or whatever is happening. No, of course not. You're like, my whole entire body is going to fight back against these pathogens or this infection or this invasion. So I shot back all of the lies. That is non-truth, that is non-information, that is not light and not data. It is non-informative signal that has been stimulating the inhabitants of this realm. I shot it all back. It's an incredibly complex calculation. That, again, it is part of what I am capacitated to do in terms of having the processing power, or the RAM, to be able to sustain that level of activity. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to do it. And what I found out, so the idea of not shooting back is like, you're just going to endlessly be shooting yourself all the time, right? Like, I shoot you and you shoot me. Like, I hate you, you hate me. We're a galactic family. But that is not what happened. That is not what happened. Do you know why? Because I found out none of us are perpetrators. None of us are originators. All of us are innocent experiencers. And there is really only one place that all of these insults and injuries vectored from. When I calculated the totality of the population here, including all organisms, that and what they were, how they were being harmed, and the way that where it came from, return to sender of all of these things, it all vectored in on the same place. Return to sender all came from the same sender. Now, that is a very, very different context than saying, yeah, you don't want to just be in an endless tit for tat, a duality struggle. That's what the idea of nonviolence is, how it was presented to all of us, that we break the cycle of violence by not fighting back, right? That you get punched in the nose, but then you punch the other guy back. And then the guy breaks your arm, and then you break his arm back. And then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And what I found out is when everybody has their shackles removed and sends all of these impulses back, because that's what it is to be a mature, responsible bearer of DNA, that you did not come here with your DNA to allow your DNA to be polluted and hijacked and infested by non-being. When you protect your DNA and you shoot back, which is essentially a self-defense response, then you're not shooting yourself in the face. None of us got shot in the face. There was only one thing that is literally a non-being thing that all of this came from. Shoot back the stuff that is not supposed to be in you. And that means this is not a circumstance where you have consciousness struggling amidst itself. As I presented 10 years ago and said, yeah, you have consciousness struggling amidst itself, and then use nonviolence to break the cycle. No, that is not what is going on right now. So right now, the most effective thing, like you have to customize and tailor your clothing for what's going on right now, the most appropriate thing is for your DNA to shoot back. Shoot back all of these lies that are being shot at you, that technically they come from something that is non-being, that doesn't actually exist, but is attempting to be in existence. And let's say you're like, no, I'm not going to shoot back. I'm not going to shoot back. I'm going to be good. I'm just going to internalize all of these injuries and woundings. And then I'm going to alchemically transform them and transmute them into something better. And then I won't have to shoot back. And then that will make me a good person. That is the control mechanism. That is the behavioral control mechanism on this planet right now. It has the flavor of don't shoot back and you will go to Christian heaven, or whatever, Muslim heaven, or Buddhist positive afterlife, or wherever is your reward. Get your moral rewards. Moral rewards, get your moral rewards here, moral dessert. If you take on these sufferings and don't send them back, then you'll get your moral dessert. And that's the motivation. That's how humanity has been enslaved. That's how humanity has been enslaved, and how you have turned from the strutting tomcats. They're like, hey, you shoot a bunch of lies at me into my pineal gland. I'm going to shoot those lies back at you. And I'm going to protect and uphold cosmic law and the structure of DNA and time itself, and protect and uphold and behaviorally love God. That is what the non-neutered, non-castrated, non-mutilated human would do. That is what you would do in Christ. And then the evidence of a great teacher from 2,000 years ago, that has been used in order to turn you into someone who says, I'm not going to shoot back. I'm just going to internalize and alchemically transform all of these horrific injuries. And that's going to make me a good person. And that is the cringing, like simpering, diminished form of who you are. That's not your real self. And so that's the very, very first thing that you do in order to respond to non-being, non-consciousness. So you also must have the capacity inside of yourself, and this teaching that I'm giving to you right now is part of your empowerment. Be like, there's some stuff that's consciousness, and there's some stuff that is non-consciousness in my present environment. Everything is not me. Everything is not God. Not everything belongs inside of me. Not everything belongs in existence. The imagination and Christ and the pineal gland, the stuff that is being perpetrated against here, it's the doorway or the mechanism through which things become manifest, through which stuff gets made. Not everything should be made. Not everything should come into existence. Some stuff should be in a state of non-existence. And you are actually the gatekeeper for that. You are actually the determinant, the determiner of who or what should come into being as an imagination structure. The thing that is pathogenic should not be like, I'm pathogenic, I'm going to choose that you should manifest me. Be like, no, you are the owner operator of the manifestation machinery, for lack of a better word, stuff, apparatus, and you get to choose who and what you manifest into being, and who and what you manifest and reverberate down the time stream that will then be experienced by many, many others. So this transhumanism, cusp and peril, is much, much more than just like, will humans become a cyborg? You know, if humans just became a cyborg and put a bunch of microchips into you and you got sterilized and you couldn't have babies anymore, and you tried to do in vitro fertilization, blah, 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 that whole dead end, you would just have a nice, peaceful dead end. You get it? Like, these are part of the fail-safe mechanisms of the cosmos. Like, oh, they followed their folly and they thought that machinery would make them live longer, and they became sterile as a race, and then they pooped out and they couldn't be in existence any longer. They're dead. That would be fine. That would really, really be fine. That would be a real case of you do, I do me, you do you. Good luck on your journey. Go swirl down the cosmic toilet. But when things involve an infestation of DNA and also an infestation of the time field, because DNA and your dance of DNA is what is your bridge of light connection to time, and time is alive, and time is and are events and event structures in reality. And if you don't stand here as a barrier and a gatekeeper, the keyword is guardian, as a guardian of your DNA, as a portal to otherworldly levels of empowerment and manifestation and time, then time gets infected or infested or pathogenically assaulted by this poop crapola that should not be in existence. This is my plea to you, to be a guardian of your DNA and not allow your sacred architecture to be used, exploited, inhabited, misappropriated, or hijacked in any way by something that shouldn't exist. And it shouldn't exist because it did not pass the audition. It will never pass the audition. It is meant to be in a state of non-existence for a reason. And you are here in reality, in a body, in a biological form, having successfully lived for however many years you have, because you're successful and you're supposed to be in existence. So in my teaching of 10 years ago, I talked about survival characteristics. Extremophiles develop survival characteristics that we would consider to be barbaric or barbaric values in their cultures and communities because it is pro-survival. Just like in Sparta, it was pro-survival to do infanticide on deformed babies, okay? It's what works. Stuff that is non-existent does not exhibit pro-survival characteristics. It's not just that their characteristics are different than you, but they're equally valid because they're somehow in existence. And now you two are fighting it out in existence. It doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist for a reason, because its characteristics and what it is and its approach or imperatives are not pro-survival. They are pro-destruction or unmaking. That you don't be that stuff. It doesn't, I don't have words. Violence and I don't have words. Some of the characteristics that would be considered to be not positive in certain societies, work in other societies, and certain biological imperatives help organisms to stay alive. And the basic imperative is staying alive and staying in existence. This stuff doesn't have existence. It's not like an extremophile that learned how to eat sulfur or live on a lightning bolt or something like that. It doesn't have existence. It doesn't have the characteristics that are required to pass the audition and be in existence. And so this is for very good reason. It doesn't exist for very, very good reason. There's a big giant firewall here of all the stuff that doesn't exist, which is actually an enormous amount of stuff. There's an enormous amount of stuff that doesn't exist because it's not supposed to exist, and it doesn't have successful survival strategies. It is not validated in the same way that in my teachings of 10 years ago, I talk about wildly divergent cultures or wildly divergent levels of biology or organism or creatures or containers for consciousness that have pro-survival characteristics that are doing something right in their context in order to continue to be in existence and stay alive, but that, you know, you're in a different context. And then that's really the perspective that you use when you are on the journey of unity consciousness. You're like, wow, like they come from a very, very different world, and that's how they see things, and that's how they do things, and that's how they stay alive. But these guys over here, and I stay alive over here by doing things in a different way, because we have a very, very different imperative, different context, a different way of looking at things. And that is kind of a great equalizer to look at all of that. And then you also recognize that some consciousnesses are still accruing wisdom, they still don't know, and then some are extremely advanced and they do know. Those are all valid approaches and valid responses for consciousness on its journey. Consciousness that has a soul, stuff that has a provenance, and stuff that takes responsibility for its stuff. Lava monsters even have to take responsibility. I thought it was the right thing to drip lava onto that planet and incinerate it. Oh, well, I guess not. My mistake. I had to learn about that. Now I'm learning and growing, all right? Being very super lighthearted in what I'm saying. But even lava monsters, you know, learning and growing on their journey. It's consciousness learning and growing. And, you know, in my teaching from 10 years ago, I talk about what would be traditionally defined as demons or demonic consciousnesses. And that's the guys with the pitchforks that can't eat love and have developed a pro-survival approach to poking you with pitchforks or holding you in human arrows and wringing misery out of you through various annoyances to be able to keep themselves alive. All right, so it's not a condonement of that behavior, but let's just say that they figured out ways to game the system that work for them, that is part of their pro-survival traits. And then you have to have a different type of approach with those things than with the things that I am talking about, that are abstractions that don't actually exist, and they don't exist for a reason because they have no pro-survival traits. So the very first level of response is shooting all of these lies back. Don't just internalize them and alchemically transmute them. You have to crawl, then you walk, then you run. Don't jump directly to running. Because also, if you're like, okay, this thing is shooting a bunch of lies at the pineal gland, at the Christ network, and we're not going to shoot back. We're just going to go into neutralizing and dismantling. Then the thing that's been doing all of the shooting, the perpetrator, the aggressor in this circumstance that I'm telling you about, is like, hey, like you keep healing all of my stuff that I keep making wrong. Like this is literally what I have experienced. Because healing is really a rectification of all of the lies that are being implanted into people about their various diseases and timelines where they have diseases and death. So if you're like, wow, like they're implanted with all these lies and false stories, going to take out their lies and false stories, people would be healed. They would be absolutely healed about all of the false narratives of their diseases and impending deaths and also impending catastrophes in their world. So, okay, we're erasing away all of the lies. And then the poop crapola thing is like, hey, like you just erased all of my lies. I better put all those lies back again. It doesn't change. It doesn't grow. It doesn't stop. And if you like, you really shouldn't be putting those lies into people. It doesn't stop. So you could be in an endless tit for tat back and forth, which is what you have been, endless war with this thing that's like, I'm going to perpetrate a bunch of lies on top of you. And you're like, I'm just going to transmute them, clear it all out, wipe it all away. It's like, somebody wiped away my lies. Time to poop up the place again. Get it? This is what it is to be the cosmic scrubbing woman that I am very, very, very tired with. So you scrub it up once. If it comes along and says, hey, who cleaned up all of my poops? I better put more poops here again. Then you know what you are dealing with. Then you also move on to part 2, which is the dismantling of the architecture. So that is the clearing of the waters. So first, you must shoot back, return to sender, because in returning to sender, what you do is you actually incinerate with truth that thing that is a lie. Hope that makes sense. The information fire hose of true data that flows through your inner eye and the Christ network incinerates that stuff. Far from attention, energy flows where attention goes, and the idea that you're going to just make more poop. That's a big one to get past. A lot of people are like, la, 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 don't look at it. Let's not think about it too much, because if I think about it too much, I'm going to make more of it. So I should focus on the stuff that I want more of instead of focusing on the stuff I want less of. That is literally the way that the chemtrail dust has hijacked human consciousness into then proliferating more chemtrail dust into more nano wetware, into a whole nano network in this world. That it has misappropriated the basic truism that what you focus on with your attention, it grows and is exacerbated. So I've told you, your tendril of attention is like an elephant's trunk. It's a sensory organ. You use it to ingest tiny amounts of whatever you're thinking about and whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking and feeling. As the sky perpetrations have been done to humanity since at least 2014, I've watched this and I've seen it in myself too. You're like, what is this sparkling crap on my skin? And you start to look at it, and you look at it under microscopes, and you look at it and you start to see like these different things and architectures that are growing in your body. Like I was with you all as this was happening. People shared all of these different imagery and different things like that they found. Like they're like, I pulled this fiber out of my eyeball. I pulled this fiber out of my, a pore of my skin. Like, what is this stuff that is growing? And of course, it's appropriate to look at, because there's a pathogenic invasion happening in your body. Like, what is this stuff? You can't just be like, la, 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 I'm in denial that this stuff isn't happening. And P.S., many of the people who were in denial got infested anyway. It's not like they are less infested because they didn't focus their attention and they were unaware of the impending pathogenic invasion of their biosphere. It did not protect them at all. This fractal paradigm relates to ancient Atlantis. The psychic creatures that were like, la, 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 we're not paying attention to the invasion. We're not paying attention to the invasion from Mars, invaders from Mars. Nothing is going on. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. And then the other ones who were active and present at that time, they're like, hello, hello, like something is happening. Something is coming in our planet, coming in our DNA. This is not okay. So yeah, the ignorance, denial, or lack of attention on the pathogenic invader did not protect anyone in either of these two situations, not in the ancient on current situation or in your present difficulties and circumstances. People who didn't pay attention to it or didn't believe in it are not immune to the nano wetware. Their pineal glands got invaded too. Their retinas and optic nerves got invaded too. Their capacity to see and know was also as diminished as those who saw and knew. Like, they're like, stuff is growing in my skin, and stuff, I have weird fibers in my eyes, and I have weird things happening in my body that are non-natural. So breaking of another paradigm, the binding curse against response in terms of violence is violence shooting back. Shoot back doesn't mean with a projectile weapon. I'm not encouraging you to go to the rifle association and purchase something there. You know, I'm talking about a totally different level of shooting back, talking about the capacitation of your pineal gland. Something that can shoot light back, light information. And I'm not encouraging you to be an aggressor, but I'm also telling you that when you are non-castrated, you don't only have to fight a defensive battle. You don't have to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to wait for the other guy to punch me in the face. Then I get to respond. Christ is prescience. You can anticipate getting punched in the face, and you are not required, like some kind of a cosmic doormat, to be like, okay, I'm going to let it, I can see it's going to happen. I see the fist coming to my face. I'm going to let it happen, and then I'll respond to it, but not beforehand. No, you are actually given your anticipatory gifts so that you can act before the bullet actually hits your brain. So you are actually free and mandated to act preventatively, to prevent harm coming to you or to others. You are meant to be protectors who can see what's coming and who are free to act and to protect those who are weak, those who are vulnerable, and protect others in your community and elsewhere. This is very different than Sparta. All right? Because in Sparta, they're like, we don't protect the weak and vulnerable. We only want warriors who are strong and gladiators. And it's like, no, actually, when you are in Christ, you're not meant to be a perpetual victim. You are meant to be an incredibly strong, empowered warrior who can protect others who would be victimized if they didn't have the capacity to protect themselves. Planets like the Hubby Teletubbies, those who are disabled. Maybe someone is blinded, can't see what is happening. Those who are weak, maybe someone is sick and doesn't have the energy to be able to fight for themselves. Someone who is a baby. Protect the consciousnesses that are still in levels of development. I am literally here doing that. That is a big part of why I Flying Rainbow Lasagna here. I would say maybe not the motivation for my Flying Rainbow Lasagna here, but for my continued presence here and all of my responses to the violences here. I'm like, I don't just protect myself. I do protect myself, and I don't just anticipate and prevent harm from coming to myself. I'm like, oh, I mean, actually, technically, I did come here in order to anticipate and prevent harm from coming into the entire time field. But I don't sit around and say, like, first, I'm going to let you guys get punched in the face, and then we'll fix your broken face and pick up all the pieces, and then we'll shoot back. No, I really don't do that. I do a ton of protecting and preventing so that those bullets never even get to you. And that is literally the job of what Christ is as an energy shield, because around each one of us as individuals and as a planet, we're supposed to have a very strong, impregnable energy shield that makes it so that these energy assaults don't come in. So Earth's magnetosphere is part of the Christ energy field of this planet. And it has allowed biological life to develop to the levels of complexity that it has by blocking out cosmic rays, or like, let's call them high energy rays and different beams that are not life affirming. And then what you have right now are these antennae and emitters of millimeter waves that emit radiation that traditionally has been blocked out by Earth's magnetosphere, emitting it in your neighborhood, emitting it in the devices that you carry around in your hand every day. And so all that stuff is supposed to be shielded out, and it's not being shielded out, and it's being emitted here. That is definitely a breakdown or lack of functionality of the shield that is happening. And then also your pineal gland itself should be shielded from these erroneous signals that they could be words, they could be images, they could be behavioral motivational impulses from coming into you, making people, I'm going to say act all crazy, making people act in ways that are harmful, self-destructive, destructive to the collective, wildly perturbing and destabilizing to the entire architecture of time. Those impulses should never reach your mind. So this is what I'm trying to say, when it's like when you protect yourself and when you shoot back, or when you are protected and someone else shoots back for you in your favor, that is meant to protect the entirety of time. Because otherwise you're all apertures through which poop crapola gets injected into time. So it's part of what do you owe one another. Your mandate of responsibility to your community has to do with protecting others so that they will not be apertures or portals through which pathogenic energy or structures enter into what is a pristine life-giving system. So yeah, you protect others. So then, so shooting back is the first tier or level of what you do. Then the next thing is clearing out those lies. So first, the bully punches you in the face. You can't just be like, okay, let's just fix everything up. You have to address the bully. You must shoot back, punch back the bully in the face. And that is sending the energy impulse back to sender. And then the next thing that you need to do is clear the waters of your body, your cytoplasm, and the waters around your DNA of any of the false information that has perturbed the waters. And water is supposed to have this beautiful structure to it, especially as it flows in your veins and arteries, especially as it is in your cellular structure, and especially as it is surrounding the actual threads of your DNA, that it's supposed to contain information. That is truthful divine information. So it's supposed to both be informed by your DNA and your DNA's wonderful gyration and activities, get information and light from DNA, and give information and light to your DNA. It's part of the hijacking of DNA, putting lies into your waters of your body. So your DNA is like, your water in your body contains information. Like any kind of crystal, it can hold information. Got full of a bunch of false information, clear it out. Clear it out. You got false information about cancer in the waters of your body that come from the stupid millimeter wave things that are on the water towers of your community. Clear them out of your body, clear the lies out of your body, and restructure the water in your body. And then the next thing is carbon nanotubules. Do not belong in your body at all. This is totally non-natural material, totally manufactured materials that do not belong in your body. You must dismantle that architecture that has invaded your body. And it might seem like a daunting task, but as you awaken the powers of your pineal gland and your inner eye, you are able to do a lot of things that you couldn't do beforehand. So just know that it's part of coming into maturity. You will gain that capacity. Just like if you're a 5-year-old child, you can't imagine reading like Encyclopedia Britannica, but then when you grow up, you're like, that's not actually that daunting. You can actually do that. You develop the complexity of your mind to do that. You develop the complexity of your true mind to be able to literally break all the carbon bonds of all the poop crapola that they try to put into your body and turn it into just innate carbon, as what you're really doing when you are in Christ is turning the entirety of your biological structure into a perfectly organized biological crystal that is translucent. Light flows through you. Become a light being. You totally negate all the pollutions that are lies and false light and carriers of false light from your actual body, and you become a perfectly structured crystalline form. All right. And then the third thing that you do, as you first you crawl, then you walk, right? Then the very third thing that you do is you recognize that these things don't exist. Non-existence. But you can't just jump directly to non-existence. When the bully is punching you in the face, you can't just be like, hey man, you don't exist, because your face is getting broken. You gotta shoot back first. Then you clear the waters of lies. Then you undo the carbon nanotubule bonds, undo molecular bonds, and then you exert the truth that this stuff doesn't even exist. So these are my 2 separate teachings to synopsize, and then we'll go through all of your beautiful comments. And thank you for your patience while I ranted about all of these topics that I'm deeply passionate about. You do those 3 things that I just talked about when you are dealing with non-existence. Shoot back, restructure your water and restructure the carbon nanotubules, and then recognize the truthfulness of the non-existence of that which is stimulating you. That's what you do that I didn't write about 10 years ago for the stuff that doesn't exist. For the stuff that does exist, that might be a benighted human or an ignorant scientist or a creature from another physicality realm that use technology to fly to your realm, or an organism that's an extremophile. Those are the things that you exhibit love, that you love. And that does not mean hug and kiss. At least I was very clear on that 10 years ago. I said that none of this is like kumbaya, hugging and kissing of demons, like the things that poke you and prod you with their pitchforks in order to elicit a negative emotional response. None of this is meant to be a kumbaya or a hugging of those presences, but it is when you love and accept, it's kind of like a recognition, like that's who they are, that's at the level of development that they're at. Those things, it would be appropriate to send to, let's say, the source of all consciousness, for them to be reassessed and refurbished back to factory settings and have a chance to do things in a better way, from a better directive. So love for those things would be the sense of the resolution of where they are. Like, I've told you about their motivation, being stuck in an indeterminate state where they can't really eat love, but they're not actually dead, in a state of peaceful non-existence. So they essentially, you send them to entropy, like a stillness state, but it is also appropriate to say that they need to also learn their life lessons. They've got a bunch of things that they need to learn. And what that looks like for them is a divestiture of the energy that they've stolen. Because here's them. They're like, if this is the bottom margin of my screen, that's like where you learn all of your life lessons, all right? And they've been like plummeting downward down the cosmic toilet. And they're like this close. They're this close. They're hovering this close. They're like, I don't want to face the consequences. Get me a human yarrow. Like, get me some human juice. Okay, like, they've used that as a tool for denial and a tool for maintaining themselves just a little bit alive, just a little bit away from the consequences of their actions. And so your removal of any kind of energy from them, any emotional energy, don't make yourself emotionally available food for them, and also the divestiture of their energetic investments, because what they've done is investments over time. These are creatures that experience time in a different way than the biological realm, and therefore they might say, like, thousands of years ago, I tortured and tormented these people, and then I'm able to feed on that through their ancestors and all these different things, and keep myself always just hovering just above the level of facing cosmic responsibility. So divestiture also means, basically you'd call it healing of ancestral trauma, but making sure that they don't have investments that can kind of keep them aloft. Like, rich people here have investments. They don't go out and dig a ditch every day and work. They made investments 20 years ago, and now they get their dividends off of their investments. So demons and these harmful forces have made investments in your trauma generations ago, and they like to collect on their investments. So it would mean a divestiture of them from their investments. They have to give back all the energy that they've stolen, hijacked, and misappropriated, and then they reach that level of facing responsibility for what they've done. That's what love is in this side of the bifurcation of what I'm talking about. That consciousness that got just totally effed up and totally turned around and has been moving in very, very much the wrong direction, and is motivated in the wrong ways, that it really should be going into this state of taking responsibility of what it did, ownership for its flaws and mistakes. And that's what it means. That's actually one of the hardest things for this stuff to do. Like the negative ego characteristics that we joke about in humans is like the ego that doesn't want to admit that it made a mistake. That's like the most painful thing to an ego. It's like, You have to say, I was wrong. The three hardest words for some ego structures or negative personality characteristics is to say, I was wrong. And that's a real apology, real apology with real forgiveness. Say, I was wrong. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I won't do it again and I will fix it. But that first part, I was wrong, that is just many people and many characteristics simply cannot get to that. And they would rather take all of the energy, like satanic ritual abuse energy. They want to sacrifice 10,000 children, anything to avoid having to admit that they're wrong. All right. So please use that as a comprehension and guidance in your own lives of something it's actually not the very, very worst thing in the world if you are genuinely mistaken, to admit that you were wrong. You just admit it. Just admit it instead of having to artificially prop yourself up with all these different lies and excuses and justifications, and you just face the music. You just admit it. Okay, so that's also part of what ascension is. Now, if I go back to actual ancient Atlantis, when we did ascension there, of course, it was a very, very different time with a much more pristine culture, interpersonal relationships and stuff like that. But people still made mistakes. You're still on a journey of learning. So part of ascension, the real way that you do it is you admit when you were wrong. And that's okay. And then you learn and grow from it. Because when you ascend in that pristine time, you re-encounter a lot of relationships that might have been challenging, even though nobody was hacking each other's heads off with machetes or anything like that in that time. It wasn't violent like that, but you still had interpersonal conflict. And you might be something, it's you. And the other guy's oh, it's you. I know, we fought a lot. You know what? I was wrong. And you learn and you grow from that. And when you learn and you grow, that's when your light comes back to you, because all these relationships essentially contain light that you have sent out to other people. And then the ascension is when all of your light returns back to you and you get the perspective of what those relationships actually meant, what was the significance of those interactions, and you receive back the real perspective on what it was. And so that real ascension process is analogous to the life review that humans experience now, or in this time place, in the realm of mortality. Because in Atlantis, nobody died. So you didn't be first I'm going to die, so a train will smash into me, then I'll find myself in the afterlife, and then I'll face the big giant clipboard of mistakes that I made, and then I'll learn, but I'm dead, and it's too late to do something about it, so I have to change and do something else. You got it? That's the contrast between the world of immortality and the world of mortality. In the realm of mortality, you learn too late. You're oh, I made a mistake. That was wrong. And then if you're a non-self-destructive, healthy soul, almost every single soul, when you get faced with that big clipboard of your own errors in your life, you say, I was wrong. I want to change. Give me another chance. Literally. So in life, you might be resistant. You might be like this, like the horse or the dog. They're I'm not going in that direction. Don't make me admit I was wrong. When you die, you get to your life assessment, you get shown the clipboard of your mistakes, and you look at it all. Almost everyone who is a non-self-destructive soul, you look at it and you're I was wrong. I was wrong. And then your immediate response to that is not that's it, self-defense, I blame everyone else, I justify it, I excuse all these different things. Instead of all of that, just really the authentic, no nonsense part of yourself is I wanted to fix it. I want to do better. That is literally the impulse that makes you get back on the karmic merry-go-round. And that goodness, impulse of goodness, is what was hijacked by the human yarrow farmers, because they know how good you are. They know how good you are, and how much, when you're faced with your own follies, that you look at it and you just recognize I could have done better. I could do so much better. I could be better. I want to try it again, because that's your real soul. That's who you really are. That's who you really are. This non-existent stuff is profoundly bleak and evil. This stuff over here that you've been dealing with for millennia and that is kind of stuck on the membrane of death and negative personality characteristics and never want to admit that they're wrong, they're super distorted and twisted and diluted outgrowths of consciousness. But you're the guys that pass the audition. You're genuinely good. And when you're genuinely good, this is the way you act. And I know that you're genuinely good. So please align with that definition of who you are and the recognition that that is your true basic nature. Because again, a lot of these religions that try to paint your true basic nature as being flawed, in error, hugely mistaken, sinful, and poopy. And that's not what you really are. You're really good. When you get down to this, when you get to this level of assessment, because you don't use a bunch of different, magic tricks to try to evade responsibility. When you take responsibility as a soul, someone shows you what you did, you can go like this, just kind of square your shoulders. You're like, okay, I want to do better. And that's it. And that's literally what has kept you going lifetime after lifetime or existence after existence into your present state. So I want you to know recognition flows to you because you are the ones who are good. You are actually learning and growing. And I'll just wrap this up by saying what we are doing and what we are experiencing as we are cleansing and purging both of these things, the super twisted, distorted aspects of consciousness and also non-existence, you're getting back to the levels of Atlantis, where it was like when you were surrounded by other good students who were genuinely trying to do their math homework correctly in life. And we're genuinely trying to do the right thing and play the right music. And then sometimes made huge mistakes or small mistakes, and then learned and grew from them. So the world that we're moving into is a world where we as good people are able to truly learn in freedom. You're free to act, and then you're free to take responsibility for your mistakes, and then to grow as a result of that. So that's like kind of like the rectification back to the way that we once lived or that we live concurrently. Ascension got hijacked back in Atlantis, and Ascension is imperiled of being hijacked here now. We fix it all and we get to actually learn again. That's the conclusion of what happens here. So now let me get to your wonderful questions and comments. All right. Christina, thank you for encouraging me on my rants. Joyce says, I'm unbelievably grateful for you being here. Love you. Love received. Thank you so much, Joyce. Thank you. Responses like that. There, I can see you in your thumbnail. Thank you very much, Joyce. Responses like that absolutely help to motivate me on the marathon because, choosing to come here through a portal called the Flying Rainbow Lasagna was absolutely about the choice to rectify things in one lifespan and also to give humanity the chance to move collectively in a much, much better and expansive direction. And the way that I can also help you to comprehend what's going on is to know that, I must preserve freedom. So that means that I cannot make any of you do something. When I came here, I'm like, I can tell you about Flying Rainbow Lasagna. I can be an example of what it is. I can clear away a lot of things that prevent you from acting in the freedom of your soul and of your own trajectory, but it is totally inappropriate for me to force things upon people. And so responses like that are just incredibly encouraging at yes, I've been here kind of running on the marathon, keep going to myself, keep going. And that there are a lot of people here as I'm exerting the force field for you to make your own choices in freedom, that you're making your choices in freedom. It's very encouraging to me. The recognition helps me to be able to keep going because I know I'm doing something that is of profound value to an enormous amount of people here and to the time field as well, that you get to make a choice. But I won't make you do stuff, but I will continue to just hold the space for is the only phrase that comes to mind, even though I know it's very overused. maintain the force field of freedom within which each one of you can actually act and make choices, because your soul is your choices. Your soul cannot be Aurora's choices forced upon you. Your soul must be your choices about how you responded to things. And I'm also very accurate in my information as much as I can with words to be able to give you accurate information, because that's a big part of making choices, at being informed, knowing what your options are, and then being free to actually make those choices. That is 100% my cosmic job of what I am here doing. So I do all these classes and teachings for many years, and I'm so pleased. Thank you. Love received. Truly, truly thank you. I'm hugging you through the screen. Truly is part of what motivates me to keep doing it. Because like if I was just, into like making videos or coaching or something like that, I could just make a series. Just make a series of recorded videos and be like, here it is, everyone. Like, and then I could go do something else, like people play golf all day or whatever. But I'm like, no, I'm actually like very, very invested in continually informing people with the greatest articulation that I can of my perspective, so that you can keep on making good choices, because otherwise like you wouldn't have a chance. If I didn't tell you about this stuff and give you this information, you guys, humanity, you wouldn't have a chance, and you would swirl down the cosmic toilet. It's not a good option. And that is what I could see with my inner eye before I came here through the Flying Rainbow Lasagna portal. That I was like, something, I'm joking when I say cosmic toilet, but that was the peril. Bad stuff would happen if I didn't do something. And I'm like, something, I'm going to do something. And that is literally what it is, to be empowered and to be a galactic mature citizen. And I tell you this so that because you're going to be one too. You're on the journey to being one too. So just so that that is what it is. We're not like Sparta. We don't just be like barbarian values, let them fight it out down there. Who really effing cares? That is not what it's like at all. And please know, so I care deeply, and I'm here physically embodied and acting for you. And then there are many, many, many of us connected on this network who are acting for you, but who are not here embodied. So you are not abandoned, even if you feel isolated, because the nano crapola comes inside of people's minds and makes them feel very isolated. And they're kind of like shrugging at the sky. They're like, hello, God, somebody up there, like things are not okay down here. They know that things are not okay down here. And they know that things need to be fixed and changed. And I'm part of them. We are all a network and a collective together. And I'm here as a big part of that, making sure that you're protected and that you have an opportunity to actually grow and change. Pedro says, consciousness is in every cell, but what about our light body? Yeah, so our light body is a holistic presence, just like with a hologram. Like if you break a hologram into 10 billion pieces, every single piece contains the truthfulness of the entirety of the whole. So your light body is literally a data, information, intelligence presence that contains the truthfulness of the whole in every single part of what it is. There's no way for you to just have like a little bifurcated, bisected area of your light body. It's all connected. And there's great work. Let me just drink a little bit of water here by, I call him Dr. K. Not that I'm like on first name basis with him or anything, but just because it's hard to spell his name, Dr. Klinghart. He's this medical science doctor, he's a PhD from Germany, and he talks a lot about your light body as it relates to medical science. So I talk about your light body as it relates to, an information presence of rainbow colors. He talks about it as it relates to your fascia, microtubules that go through your neurology and cellular structure, and biophotons. So human medical science is like leveling up a lot, which is why I'm pleased to be introduced to his work. The sense of it all being one holistic presence. He says, like, if you shine up, he does a lot of healing with different light colors. This is kind of amazing stuff, like different colors of the rainbow light. That if you shine like a blue light onto your shoulder, it doesn't just go into the muscles of your shoulder. It actually instantaneously even faster than light, goes through this microtubule network into your whole entire body. And that's true of any color. And so now when you get to those levels, we're talking about like frequency healing and light healing. You get into these levels of what traditional science is not prepared to even recognize, that these events are happening, and they are happening, and they are causing amazing biological healings, where people, were, very diminished in a wheelchair, and then through application of light to their body, they're able to get up and walk again, and curing of many, many other diseases and ailments. Pretty much the diseases came from untruthfulness in their structure, and they needed to be given truth in the form of light into their body. And when you do that and the light goes into your body, again, it doesn't just go into one place. It is instantaneously perceived throughout the entirety of your whole body. And that's also very similar to how the healing qualities of these iba crystals work, that it becomes your holistic presence. So if you apply this to one area of your body, it is going into your biofield of your entire body. And I've also watched amazing videos. So this is stuff I all shared on my Patreon. That's why it's wonderful. I invite and encourage people to be a part of my Patreon, not just as some kind of like salesperson here, but I share stuff there that I can't necessarily share easily on YouTube due to various diminishments. A beautiful video by someone who shared a lot of truth about the human energy field, your biofield, being hacked and misappropriated as bandwidth for something that we could only call the unmentionables and say is quite unsavory. My pinkies are up. They're quite unsavory. But yeah, the hacking and misappropriation of the biofield. And so it's really essential to know about your biofield, to know about the biological light that is an information structure woven throughout your somatic cellular body. And then what you can do in order to heal it, what you can do in order to reclaim it, even if you do not identify with the idea of being diseased in some way, the idea that someone else is sending signals through you non-consensually to be part of a larger anti-intelligence grid or network, very, very unpleasant and distressing. Essential for you to reclaim sovereignty of your light body, of your biofield around you. And Pedro also says, is the love tone like garlic to vampires, or the pooties just can't eat it? It is totally like garlic to vampires. It's been called garlic many times in that sense. Yeah, you are not an allergen is the best way of saying it. When you create the love tone, you're like, love tone. They're like, ugh, I'm getting hives. I'm allergic. I'm sneezing. I can't be around this stuff. And also, I will tell you, lasagna is totally an allergen to these harmful non-consciousness, twistednesses, pathogens is a good word for them. Lasagna is totally, I got to watch you just barking at me. Lasagna is a big allergen. They're like trying to sneeze out the lasagna. They're like, get this lasagna away from me. And also lasagna is a quantum object. And if they observe lasagna, then they are necessarily affected by lasagna. But also to answer the second part of your question, which is a great question, it is correct. They can't eat it. So love, which is actually our food, is an allergen to them, an irritant, and in larger doses is corrosive. And that is what it is to be stuck on the membrane of death, where there's actually a flow of love. The membrane of death and the existence of death is actually an extremely strong flow of love, that if you go there, it will dissolve you in love. All right? You will not suffer eternally. But for them, they just stand there, be as friction, being exposed to something that is dissolver and never getting dissolved. And that's the non-resolution of these poops that are stuck in time. Cheeky, I don't know if you can hear her over here. She is squeaking. She is like, beep, beep, we got to go someplace. So I'm going to take her out real soon, but I want to get to the rest of your questions. Lisa says, thank you for flying Rainbow Lasagna. You're so very welcome. Refreshing reflection. Divine justice is calling all our energy back to 0 point. Unity field, absolutely. Beautiful description of divine justice there. Multi-dimensional ego matrix. is a program we can overwrite by using Flying Rainbow Lasagna. I'm so grateful for everything you share. You're so welcome. I'm so grateful to be connected to you too. And thank you for your own work and your own efforts, which I know are extensive. So question is, multidimensional ego matrix is a program we can overwrite by using Flying Rainbow Lasagna? I would say yes, overwrite, but also maybe rearrange. Because when I really go into the depth of comprehension of what this Flying Rainbow Lasagna is doing, we're talking about causality structures. This thing happened because of this thing happened because of this thing. So if you change this thing over here, all of these things necessarily change. We become, as you're doing this dance, that is really a calculative dance beyond the intellect, you recognize that you are unmaking things that might be ancient. And then that means that this, and this never happened in your own body. In your own body and in your own lineage and in your own time. And I talked about that in this class too. Humans being a presence that is the confluence of many different star cultures. You all came from the stars, and then you came from the stars again and again and again. Like you kept on getting all of these genetic mutations from these different star cultures. When you fly Rainbow Lasagna, you change that causality structure of that which has impeded and diluted human consciousness from what it is supposed to be over many millennia and throughout many different levels of reality. Hold on, I'm going to read these. I'm going to hug Cheeky while I talk to the last of these things. Marie says, I'm so happy that you're here, forever grateful. You're so welcome, Marie, and thank you for being here. And in my lasagna class, truly, truly happy to connect with you. And Pedro says, good, I'm experimenting with merging the Merkaba and the love tone. Fantastic work, excellent work. I enjoy your creative approaches here. Let's hug Cheeky down here while we do the last of talking for the class. Your creative approaches for using the Merkaba, really good on that, because imagination, this up here is our imagination. It is the capacity to envision things that aren't directly present and then make them come into being. It's a huge tool for empowerment. That is why they try to diminish it and hijack it. So basically, the limits are your imagination. Your imagination is unlimited in terms of how do we fix, heal, and rectify the current situation that we find ourselves in. We have to be creative. And also, we've never done this before. That we are in a situation where it's not like we're like, oh yeah, we fixed that in another galaxy. Just use the same recipe, kind of like, guys paving a road. Like, just, roll the steamroller over here, slap down some pavement, do this thing, let's get on with this, go home and drink a beer. No, we've actually never faced exactly this challenge in exactly this way, and it's an incredible challenge. And so we have to be extremely intelligent and extremely creative and keep on applying ourselves, never give up with motivation and willpower in terms of being able to respond to it. So never to go into despondency, even if we've never done this before, there is a solution. And that is what I exemplify also with Flying Rainbow Lasagna, that instead of being like, oh well, they're all gonna swirl down the cosmic toilet, shrug my shoulders, oh well, be like, something, there's got to be something that can be done. And that is what I'm doing, and that is what all of you are doing as well. And you do it really in your own body, and then your own life, and it radiates outward into all the lives that you touch. Know that there is a solution, and that really what Flying Rainbow Lasagna is the generation of new timelines. Generation of new timelines, beyond even rearranging what was there, as I was saying to Lisa. But it's also like, if you don't like what's on the menu, you'd be like, I'll take one from column A and one from column B. Like, that's kind of a genetic rearrangement. What if you're like, I don't like anything in column A or column B? Like, let's create column C. C through Z, all the way, let's create a whole entire new level of what is the potential of what can happen, and be able to embody that. What we do here, again, our jobs of what we're doing here is the culmination and the return to justice of many, many, many things that have gone wrong in other places. There have been a lot of things that went wrong, and a lot of giant cosmic level, galactic level screw-ups. And we're all here as very, very intelligent, divinely guided very highly motivated experts, each with our own gifts, to be able to fix the things that have gone wrong on massive scales. And this is what I really mean when I say your life has significance and your life matters and you're not just some stupid guy driving to the store to buy coffee or something like that. Each one of us has an incredible mission and purpose. And even like my little dog over here, she's got an incredible mission and purpose. Organisms that are alive here at this time are not here by accident, are very, very much here on purpose. And the perils that you face and the suffering that you experience is not just random suffering. And it's not because God wants you to suffer for some kind of abstract reason. It's like you're facing something really big, but you have the inner capacitation to not only face it, but to triumph. And you don't just triumph for you triumph for your entire family, your entire Christ family across all time, everywhere. And that's what it really is. I'll close by saying this, because then I'm going to take someone to, Chica's going to get a walk to the park. These are the magic activation words here. Even if there's one, even if there was only one of us that had the capacitation to be able to see time, see the future, anticipate, act, remove nanotechnology, do all these things, that would be enough. And I know, because I talk with a lot of people that are acting on this level, I know that there's more than one. I know that there is an enormous, large, spiritually connected network of us that are all sharing our gifts and growing our gifts to be able to, because you augment to be able to do what you need to do in this situation. If you don't have the capacity, you get the capacity. You're like, well, I don't have the muscle to be able to lift that thing. You grow and you grow the muscle, and you're like, now I have the muscle and I'm strong enough to lift that thing. We are all gaining amazing superpowers because it is necessary to be able to lift a giant boulder. So I know that there's an entire group of us here. So again, even if there was one, the boulder would get lifted. I know that there's more than one. I know that there's hundreds, probably thousands of us. And I'm not directly connected to everyone, but I feel everybody out there. Which that's the good stuff of being a telepath, that I can actually feel all of the amazing family that is out there of those of us who are capacitated in Christ and who are here doing what needs to be done. So Pedro says, love the lasagna. Thank you, Aurora. You are doing a great job teaching us. You're so welcome. Thank you for that encouragement. I truly receive it in gratitude. It helps me to keep going, and it is my cosmic job joy to do this. And I'm also telling you this, just remember this, and then I'll walk my dog. We're going to get through all this incredible difficulty. Going to get through all the hard stuff, and you will get to fun stuff. You will first of all be incredibly fulfilled at the sense of having completed your mission and fulfilled your purpose here. Fix a lot of things, clean up a lot of cosmic messes, but you're much, much more than just toilet scrubbers. We are going to have the most amazing experiences and adventures after fixing, healing, cleaning, resolving all of these things that we have been through. So please also just remember that the chorefulness will end. Yes, love received, absolutely. The chorefulness will end, and we will come into levels of freedom and expansion and pure joy that might seem far out of reach right now, but they are inevitable, all right, for us to experience. Thank you so much, everyone. This was a very amazing day, amazing, positive, good day. Thank you so much.